Hi, everyone, and welcome to Connect Spring. I'm Peter Giannetti with the International Housewares Association, and we're here today to talk about the post-COVID consumer. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Our speakers will be taking questions at the end of the session, so please go ahead and use the Q&A function to submit your questions at any time during the session. These sessions are also being recorded, and they will be available on the IHA website within 2 weeks of the event conclusion, so around mid-April. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our session sponsor, Ucopia. And I'd like to introduce you to Lauren Greenwood from Ucopia to say a few words. Lauren, welcome.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, I'm Lauren Greenwood, founder and president of Ucopia. Our first international home and houseware show was in 2010 in a 10x10 booth buried in the South Hall. We were selling one product in a very commodity-driven category at the time of storage and organization. We've grown our brand over the years, thanks in part to using consumer trends and insights, much like the ones you'll be hearing about today, to bring innovation into our product development process. Today, Ucopia is leading the way in a fast growth category with a full line of adjustable organizers that never require installation and deliver a woohoo feeling at home. We can be found in over 3,500 US retail doors, and we reach millions of consumers each year. If you'd like to have a discussion or get a sneak peek of our new spring product drop, please email me at lauren@ucopia.com. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I look forward to seeing everyone in Chicago in 2022. Enjoy.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks to Ucopia for supporting today's session. With that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. I'm pleased to introduce Joe Derochowski, who's the Vice President and Home Industry Advisor for the NPD Group, Tom Mirabile, who's the founder of Springboard Futures and the Consumer Trend Analyst for IHA, and Leana Salamah, who's the Vice President of Marketing for IHA. Complete bios of our speakers are available on the Connect Spring page at theinspiredhomeshow.com. So let's get started, everyone. Welcome to today's panelists. Thanks for joining us. I hope our viewers had a chance to tune in earlier today to the first episode of the special IHA Market Watch video series, during which we explored space. Well, we explored the lifestyle trend of space. Upcoming episodes of the Market Watch video series on Friday and next Wednesday and Friday, we'll take a look at comfort, time, and safety and security. These are all trends that were amplified during the pandemic. And we learned that they are motivating consumers from so many angles and opening so many opportunities for the home and housewares business. These macro trends, if you will, weave the thread connecting much of what we'll be talking about today as we try to add some clarity on who the post-COVID consumer is, what makes them tick, and how this industry can best serve them. You're going to hear our panelists touch on such themes as lasting household changes, digital fatigue, post-pandemic industry headwinds, trend tension, and a multi-step return to a new sense of normalcy. And I think that's a good place to start. I'll start with you, Leana. I think before we kind of determine who the post-COVID consumer is, we're trying to get a sense of when the post-COVID consumer is. What are you learning right now in terms of what people think will be that kind of step toward normalcy?
Well, certainly, you think that right now there's a lot of positivity out there with vaccines being rolled out, with people starting to feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But we have a ways to go yet. We spent the last year, from a high watermark in January of 2020 through a low watermark of April of 2020. And now we've been kind of ticking slowly, up and down, bumpy along the way. But we still have a ways to go before we truly get back to normal. There's a group that I watch carefully called Morning Consult, and they put out public information on a daily or weekly basis related to consumer confidence and consumer comfort levels. And just this morning, I took a look at it. And, the truth is that 36% of folks still say it's going to be at least 6 months, if not more, until they're ready to dine out again. In the entertainment category, they measure everything from movie theaters to weddings to parties to amusement parks. And the thing that people are most comfortable with right now is museums, and that's only 33% of people. On the flip side, 33% of people also say it will be 6 months or more before they're ready to go to a movie theater. So when we think about this, and travel too, you're starting to see travel come back into play, but still only 27% of people really feel comfortable on an airplane right now. So we are not at the finish line or even really close to it by any stretch of the imagination. So when we talk about the post-COVID consumer, I think we're looking at it in kind of a near term and a midterm and then a long-term range. And I think we'll go through that through all of our topics today.
Yeah, we are going to talk about it in those steps. And we will address this as if when that consumer is kind of in full bloom, what's going on. Tom, some of your thoughts on kind of the timing going forward and how people sort of need to prepare for this sort of uncertainty of when things get back to that next or that step after that.
Well, I mean, it's I completely agree with what Leana said. It's there, everybody keeps talking about, the new normal, and we keep saying there will be no new normal. There will be the now normal, and that can change regionally. That can change, based on, look what happened the other day in the drops we've seen in confidence in the vaccine because of what's happening with that now. So I mean, we all have our favorites. I like to follow Gartner, and they sort of take a snapshot every week of shifts in what consumers are concerned about. So, but it's interesting to me that when you look at older generations, Gen X, boomers, matures, their number one concern actually right now is the U.S. economy because they're vaccinated. Most of them are vaccinated for the most part, or they're well on the way. They're next on the list. And then the next concern for them is, the spread of contagious variants of COVID. Whereas younger generations, Gen Z, millennials, number one concern is me or my family getting sick. And then number two, surprisingly, is the U.S. economy. So, but when we look at that, this is one of the things that's causing so much stress in younger generations. And in terms of getting back to normal, I think it's going to be one of those things that fits and starts, because even the things that we talk about, like going to restaurants, things like that, there's an expense to that. Same thing with travel. Everybody's talking about there's going to be a huge influx of people traveling again. Yes, but that and restaurants in this economy are not necessarily sustainable on a daily, weekly basis.
Joe, when you look at data and you use that data to help kind of project forward, what are your insights and your instincts telling you about how this will be a staged sort of recovery, if you will?
I think it's one of the things that's interesting, like Tom said, we all kind of track our things. I know I look at a lot of civic science data that they have. And what I thought was interesting is they also asked the same question amongst people who received the vaccine, and you get a very different response. And I think that teaches us, like when we fill out surveys, when we fill out questions, we're doing the best we can to answer it with what we know. But the reality is, once you get the vaccine, we don't know how we're going to feel and how invincible and what the behavior. So if some of you got to be watching and listening for what the consumer is going to do. And part of it, like when you hear some of the older consumers who have received the vaccine, you can just hear the passion and craving that they have to see the grandkids and to see that. So there's going to be this connection right out of the box where families are just going to try to connect with those that they haven't seen for a while. So you can almost bank on that going to happen. Then the rest gets into what are the things we're going to have. There's a lot of things that we're going to want to scratch, like going out to the restaurants, whether it's going to travel. There's going to be things that we just crave for a bit that now that you feel free, just like when we all got together, it was very nice to be liberating to be out for a little bit, that you're going to scratch it there. And I'm sure some of that. So my sense is we're going to start out, it'll probably be a little bit of a inertia that happens. Then like Tom had said, it's going to be a little bit of a start and stop after that. And then we'll start to settle into a new little bit of a normalcy that happens. And it really is going to be this different life that has different needs. And there's fundamental changes that's happened now that will stick. And that's also going to guide the behaviors that we have.
Well, let's start by talking about some of the behaviors and some of the things that we think will stick. And then we'll kind of drill into how things might change as some of these steps kind of occur in society right now. Eating habits, cleaning habits, home office. We can go through the litany of things that sort of amplified during the pandemic. Tom, I'll start with you. What's the root of understanding what's going to stick right now going forward?
Well, I think one of the things, and Joe just mentioned it, when we all got together a week or 10 days ago, it was like all of a sudden, we had a pod. We'd all tested before, and I think that because of that, retailers are going to have to look at these sort of the two sides of the consumer mindset. Like I'll give you a food trend that we've all been talking about. Okay, there's the single serving trend, which like, people like Nordic Ware and other people who are doing lots of single serving great things, that's getting a lot of play on Instagram. It's getting a lot of play on Pinterest. All the food blogs are talking about it, how individual portions, no more space. And then the opposite side of that, this grazing trend, which is enormous right now. It's everywhere. And they're big boards, like some of them the size of an entire table, that are loaded with food, and it's just grab and go. So, I think retailers have to be prepared to speak to both those people who are still playing in their pod of 4 to 6 people until they're comfortable, and the people who are starting to really emerge socially again and re-socialize.
A one-size-fits-all approach, we've learned, is not going to be the right approach going forward. It comes with challenges operationally and strategically, but it's going to be necessary. Leana, when you take a look at some of the behaviors and the trends, where do you end up seeing the consumer in terms of kind of gravitating towards things they've been doing, but maybe for different reasons as well, too?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to cover off on something that Tom said just now, and that I know Joe has some opinions on, which is that idea of fits and starts, and how we're going to be kind of a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. We're going to go through that for a while. I think of it almost as a bell curve, right? You're going to have those early adopters who are, I'm done with this, and I'm going to have a big grazing board, I'm going to have a big party, and then you're going to have those early adopters, and then the masses will start to follow, unless something goes wrong as that's going up, then we go right back, right? So I think that being able to be responsive to those circumstances is going to be really, really critical, in the next year to 18 months as we see people start to pull out of this. But one of the things that we've explored through conversations related to Market Watch is about how the needs change, but that doesn't mean that the products and inventions and other things have to change. There's a lot of positioning and marketing in the home and housewares industry that needs to be done in order to, and a lot of it is being done, don't get me wrong, but to pivot, not thinking about, I need to develop a whole new product for that, but how do I take a product I already have and reposition it in a way that addresses a consumer need? And for example, some of the things we've been talking about are things like comfort, and that's a session that'll happen later this week. But a couple of the things related to comfort that we brought up would have been related to experience last year. Like there's an ice cream parlor set where you can kind of make your own custom ice cream. That would have been experiential last year. Now it's about comfort because it's fulfilling a different need. So I think that's what's been really interesting for me through this process, is seeing how it's not that the products change, it's not that what we want to bring into our house changes, it's that the reasons for bringing them in change.
Joe, what does some of your analysis show in terms of at what level the consumer is going to sort of cling to some of these behaviors, and maybe where they're going to sort of begin to move away from them? And then we'll talk about factors that are contributing to that.
Well, I think the 3 things that pop to my mind, top is the biggest thing is, what are these structural things that you just can't change? One, it sounds like people will be working from home more compared to 2019 and prior for a long time, whether that's full-time, whether that's some sort of partial or hybrid model. But whatever the case, if you're going to be at home more, that means from a Monday to Friday at home more, that means there's going to be more lunches, there's going to be more breakfast, there's going to be more snacking that you never had before, which really opens up an opportunity. We know people became first-time pet owners. Well, they're not going to get rid of the pets. So now there's going to be more cleaning needs that they have in the house and things that are going to be going in that space. We also know that people from the smaller spaces that moved into larger spaces and bought a home, well, as any of us who has a homeowner, the second you open that door, boy, there's a lot of things that you're going to be spending money on related to that, which is good for us. So I think some of these structural things that have been created during the pandemic is just going to open up a whole world of opportunity for us.
Well, in terms of some of the behaviors, outside of the structural realities now, I think that it's interesting. I remember maybe May or June of last year, people were saying, well, there's never going to be a time that we don't wear masks again. I don't agree with that. I think everybody's anxious to get rid of the masks. I really do. But I do think some things will stick. I think there will be a heightened awareness of personally and in the environment around you of any kind of potential for germs, potential for infestation of virus, or any other kind of germ like that. And that, I think we'll still use a lot of hand sanitizer. I still think that we'll maybe clean our bathrooms a little more carefully before the guests come over, and But I think that something like the masks, I think people are going to rip those off as quickly as they can.
I think even it's like personal care, where it's like, am I going to go back to a manicurist right away? Maybe not. Am I going? There are certain things that am I going to buy a foot massager instead of going back? So there are things like that. But I think also we've spent a lot of time and money in making our spaces transform. Okay, whether it's my dining room is my office in midday, it's dining room at dinner, dining room at dinner time, and so there's a lot of that transformation. We're liking it. We're liking the flexibility, and a lot of us don't know if this is going to happen again, when it's going to happen again, and even the irregularity regionally about when kids are going back to school. So we have to have that flexibility to, like, if everything gets shut down tomorrow again for 2 months, I've got to be able to have 2 offices in the house. So it's I think that those types of things are still going to be of interest, things that let you transform. I mean, that's why space is one of our sessions this year, because that concern is not going away. It's just changing a bit.
Well, to Joe's point, you have to sort of anticipate uncertainty, and that's not an easy thing to deal with. The one thing that's certain is uncertainty, and it speaks to this whole idea of consumer centrism, which I think for years was a word that was thrown about almost arbitrarily without really understanding what it means to be. But the industry in the last year has clearly embraced having to kind of follow the consumer every step of the way. Joe, your thoughts on, in terms of kind of, how do you embrace consumer centrism in this process? How can a company be agile while sort of trying to prepare for that outcome when it comes to tracking the consumer right now?
Well, I think part of it starts with the listening, and listening and watching, sometimes just watching and anticipating and trying to ask questions. So I've never been a big fan of me research. This is what's happened to me, so it applies to everybody. But in this day and age, it really is worth paying attention to the conversations you hear, whether it's a virtual meeting with friends or colleagues or whatever the case may be, or family, whether it's watching your Facebook and Instagram and social media posts, whether it's just watching what consumers are saying on the news and really listening and trying to get to the empathy of what are those things, and listen for those I wish, I miss, I hate, I love, those things that create a passion in the consumer, and listen for that. And then suddenly sit back and sit there and think, okay, what are they really after? And is there a different way to go after it? So I think part of it is just really this deep empathy with the consumer. And that's both for retailers and manufacturing, all across. If you think of that path to consumption or path to purchase that we have, all of these things are happening along those paths, which is the great news is going to open up this huge opportunity for innovation to make all those better. So it all starts with really listening, watching, and then looking at the data when you get hard data to follow that type of stuff to see and help interpret it.
Leana, you have some demographic insights of things that have sort of changed, unemployment. So you have to understand, not the people, a year later, people are different. Some of them are in a very different position to where they are. Their household makeup is changing, and back to keeping an eye on the consumer. Let's start with you. Let's talk about let's presume that at some point our consumers going back to restaurants. How does that affect the industry? Are they going to be going back into offices? How does that affect the industry? All of these things that we kind of abandoned because we were forced to it, that we sort of ease back into it. Where are going to be the sweet spots in understanding how we now have to adapt to some of that return to normalcy, if you will?
Well, I think to your point, you mentioned unemployment, and Tom just a few moments ago talked about personal care and are you going to go back to the salon and all of this. And some of that has to do with the comfort level related to going to the salon or going back to a manicurist. But some of it's about finances. And the truth is that, I think there's going to be a sense of frugality that's going to carry forward a little bit longer than the pandemic. You have a couple things that are factoring into that. Number one, certainly unemployment is not back to pre-pandemic levels. We don't know if it will be, because anytime there's major changes like this, there are positions, there are jobs that are eliminated by virtue of having to do things differently, and new jobs are created by virtue of having to do things differently. So how that shakes out is yet to be seen. But we do know that there are more people struggling right now than there were a year and a month ago. And the other piece of it, which I find really, really interesting, is you've got 2 million women who have left the workforce in the last year. I mean, left, like they're not looking for a job. They're done because the stress of the pandemic and the workload and the childcare and everything else has made them make a conscious decision that they're going to be at home. And what does that do? That does two things. Number one, if mom's at home more, you probably are going to continue to cook more at home, even once it's safe to go back to restaurants. And two, if mom's at home, again, you created an income disparity, you created a deficit where there was an income, now there isn't. Now there's ways to balance that out. But I think that some of those things, may last a little, may outlast the full vaccination and the herd immunity that we're going for. So those bode well for our industry. Whether or not they bode well for the average consumer, it certainly bodes well for the home housewares industry.
I think also, we have to look at the fact that one of the things we were talking about yesterday was cooking fatigue. I think there's fatigue everything. There's cooking fatigue there. I see my husband too much fatigue. There's on every level. So we're dying to get back out there again. But one of the things that's going to relieve cooking fatigue is the fact that when we are out again, when we're back outdoors, we're going to be backing into grilling season. We're going to be seeing our friends again, showing us some of the skills that we've developed during this period. And, so I think the aspect of entertaining is going to help keep our industry at the fore. But, I keep saying it, content is everything. If you're a manufacturer or a retailer, either align yourself with somebody. If you can't do your own content, align yourself, create partnerships. We're putting people in touch with new ways to use the products that you've sold them over this time, because they're still going to be using them. They still need ideas. I think it's just, we've got to be there. We've got to be there after the purchase, both manufacturers and,
Joe, what are your expectations if the consumer does start going out to restaurants? How long, how extensive will that be? Or if they start going back into offices, or if they start socializing in slightly larger packs, if you will, the things that sort of the industry benefited from, that kind of chips away at some of those purchase motivators. What's your thoughts on that?
Opportunity. That's what my immediate thought is.
How do you convert that to opportunity?
No, I think it opens the door to opportunity.
Yeah.
So let me explain. So we talk about the restaurants, but what we're thinking about is that fancy meal that we go eat, which might be, there's 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. So out of these 21 days, we're thinking about the one or 2 or 3 out of 84 that we're going to have out of the year. Like, it's not every single day. The drive-through business for fast food actually has still been doing reasonably well during this period. So I think the bigger issue is there's going to be a few meals, but that could help inspire. That could help make things there. That could open up the door for leftovers and other opportunities. The going back to work, here's one of my favorites. If you go back to work right now, a couple things are going to happen. One, because we've become so casual in our dress and our appearance and everything that we're doing, we're going to start to get a little bit more, I'll give my age, gussied up, or we're going to start looking better and the best we can, right? So as people start doing that, that's going to start fulfilling a need and a craving that was there before. So you're going to start seeing people doing the best they can to look the best they can at that time. It's going to have a chance if let's say you're portable beverage ware. Well, now I've got something at home office. I've got something now at my work office. I needed something new in the car to drive there. So now I've got 3 opportunities. You're still going to be, when you go back to work, probably a little apprehensive of going into the common areas as full as you will. Well, there's just so much little home environments, the little fans. It just basically gives you an opportunity at home. It gives you an opportunity at work. Could give you an opportunity outside. Like, it really just opens up the door, but they're all different needs and they all have different things that we got to be thinking about.
Tom, to your point on content, that's where you have to communicate. You have to figure out how to communicate this to the retailer and ultimately to the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, you have the brand value doesn't end when the product leaves your warehouse or leaves the store. That it's brand value is something you earn. That's something you have to work to keep. But I think that the other thing, and I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but it's yes, we can create meal experiences, but we have to really improve our peripheral vision, because like, if you look at one of the things we learned during the pandemic was how easy it was to order in. Okay, the one barrier to that becoming an absolutely mind-bogglingly large business that claws off housewares and home cooking is delivery, and they will figure out a way. Once they do, it puts more pressure on us as an industry to deliver things that deliver a great experience and definitely focus on delivering better results, faster, healthier, all of these things, because those are going to be what stops people from, ordering Grubhub or, every day, or, that's going to be a big competition for the housewares industry because it's
Leana, what's your thought on the headwinds that we're describing right now? Because these are all issues that have the potential, to Joe's point, they may create new opportunity, but they also have the potential to disrupt again, once again, and maybe remove some of the strength in certain categories. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you have a few different things going on that I think could cause some headaches in the short term, if not the long term. And one is certainly the explosion of experiential that will probably happen to some degree once things open up again. I know certainly the National Restaurant Association is looking forward to, they've got some numbers out about the pent up demand and the expectation that folks will be going out to restaurants much more once they open up, with much more frequency. Now, is that sustainable? Not necessarily, for a lot of different reasons, but we may see a bit of a decline in home cooking for a short period of time. To Joe's point, not every meal, but some meals. But a couple other things that occur to me is there are what I've heard Joe refer to as home and housewares product occasions. And those are those life moments that happen that warrant the purchase of new home and housewares products. And three of the big ones are weddings, marriages, back to school, and the birth of a new child. Now, the fourth one is moving or changing dwellings, if you will, and that's going gangbusters. But the other three are in trouble right now, right? You've got more and more people are taking gap years between going off to college because they don't want that to be their first college year experience. You have, I read the other day that we are going to, in 2021, we're going to be short 300,000 births because of the number of people who chose not to get pregnant in the last year for a number of reasons, right? Whether it's, to Tom's point, you're sick of your husband, or to any other, you don't want to be in a hospital, you don't want to be, under the care of you don't want to depend on the medical, infrastructure when it's showing cracks. And then weddings. I mean, there's not a lot of weddings out there right now. If there are, they're very small and controlled. So again, you don't have those same occasions to purchase product, whether it's for yourself or someone else. And we may make up for it. We may find that a year from now, we're plus 300,000 births because people were just putting it off. We may find that we're plus weddings, but in the short term, there's going to be less of those occasions.
Well, Joe, you talk a lot about the life occasions. Tom, I want to get your thoughts on kind of celebrations as well, too. But Joe, you talk about how this industry is all about those moments and celebrating the life, different moments in life. What's happening now to kind of compensate for this change in the way we celebrate and the way we purchase around those celebrations?
Well, it's opening up a different way to do it. Like, I like to think of the weddings, going back to what Leana was talking about. Last year, what ended up happening is a lot of people were forced to suddenly do something in their backyard to a very limited number of folks, and it's probably just family. Now, that said, what that usually occurred is then, you know what, I'm going to buy some fine beverageware or something because we'll probably have drinks. We may not eat, but we're going to have drinks. And then they all scheduled for this year a reception, another event. So think about it. You now have, as a guest, two opportunities, or as a retailer, two opportunities to connect with that consumer for that same life moment. So unlike other years where you had one, now I've got two. Well, a little bit is that still going to be at play this year, because some of those are going to be happening right now. And then how do you take it further out? Same thing with people having children, as you say, as that comes out, we now have all these events that says, the gender reveal. Are there ways that we can better leverage and play into that? So the moments, they are very, very different. And because of that, this is where the creativity says, if I'm a retailer, how do I get a chance to leverage these two different times to connect with the consumer and their guests? How do I better manage each of those little areas?
Joe, something you just said there, I think is really smart. And I just want to kind of put a bow on it, which is, well, and because some weddings, at least in my focus group of One World, some are not doing the post reception. They're just doing the backyard and they're just calling it a day. But what I think is so interesting about what you just said is that traditionally we think of weddings as a home and housewares occasion based on gifting and based on purchasing off a registry. And you're talking about weddings as a home and housewares occasion for the actual event itself, right, to put on the event. And I think that's a really interesting pivot and a way that you can take that same occasion and turn it on its head and look at it differently. but that requires a little bit of different approach to the occasion, different type of marketing, different type of thinking. And I love that.
Yeah, these were always annuities. The times that these purchase cycles were annuities, and they were sort of locked into them. Well, that's all been blown up right now. And Tom, it really actually creates an opportunity to reset the rules on celebrating and how we engage people, and we don't have to live by the rules of the past anymore.
No, I mean, and that's what's great, honestly, about Gen Z and millennials have really adopted this sort of ethos of, celebrate everything. And
Yeah.
it was one of the food trends that showed up across multiple influencers in specialty. Like, I'm not talking like influencers like everybody talks about, talking about magazines and, food forecasters and things like that. Because the part of it is that for people who have kids in the house, they're going stir crazy. A lot of people are dealing with depression inside the household, frankly. And it's just something to celebrate, and it's, it can be absolutely anything. And the idea of embracing that, if you go to Instagram, if you go to Pinterest and you see these, I'm celebrating that I didn't leave you this week, those types of things, there's just this great sense of humor to it. And there's a, celebrating our 10-week anniversary, anything. And the thing is, you've got to start hitting a pace of volume with that and capitalizing on some of the social media that's behind it, because you're replacing 120 people at a wedding. You know what I mean? You're replacing bigger occasions. And also, Leana, you had brought up the fact that your kids aren't graduating high school. You're not having that party at the house. You're just not able to do that. And the people who are planning their weddings again are getting a good bit of pushback on social media, as to who they invite. So it's our job and our sort of our pleasure really to try to help people find ways to relieve some of that pressure, the headwinds that that we're talking about.
I think
You know what?
that's interesting too, from the standpoint that we don't have to necessarily, as an industry, sit back and wait for people to decide what they're going to celebrate, right? We can make suggestions and create opportunities for those celebrations of the most random things, and then wait for folks to adopt them. I think about whoever came up with those giant lawn signs that say happy 10th birthday, happy 12th birthday, whatever. I mean, they just made their, made their
blow up
fortune
drive-in things. The blow up drive-in movie things are amazing.
Yeah,
So these are the
and
opportunities you sort of alluded to earlier. You have to sort of be able to see through the noise a little bit right now to kind of grab onto those opportunities, right?
Yeah, and I mean, to pick up like what Leana and Tom are saying is, what those things have, those celebrations, it creates urgency. And that's the key, because urgency is the thing that helps you reach into your pockets and pull out the wallet. Like, that's the beauty of it. And one of the things to build on what Leana had said, that is another way to think about it, is if you think about holidays, all the time when we start marketing towards holidays, we keep thinking gift giving, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. But what we also forget is at that same time, there are people still having breakfast, lunch, dinner. They're still going to work. They're still cleaning the house just for their own needs. There's also these little moments where people are celebrating, saying, you know what, I'm going to have some guests over for a little quick holiday party, that little urgency that they're going to buy for there. So it's this opportunity for an innovation, as Leana said at the beginning, from a marketing for both retailers and manufacturers, of how do you market to the event, and then how do you market also to the occasions that are happening around the event that are also opportunities. And it's, what a great time to be a marketer. Like, what a great chance to be able to leverage that.
For retailers right now, so much of yes, convenience and price are both, right at the top. But engagement, loyalty, they're about emotion right now. I keep saying it's like last year's sort of thing to say was, we get you, but it's not. Now this year it's we are you. We are who you are. And it's sending that kind of a marketing message. And I think, and by the way, I'm not doing this to throw bouquets at the IHA, but I think one of the things that we've all been talking about is the four of us in our meetings is we're devoted to a year of constantly pushing out meaningful content, meaningful consumer trends, retail trends, so that we can keep a pace with, that's what retailers need right now. They need stuff that they need ideas. What's the end cap going to be? What are we helping people celebrate? What's on social media that we need to be aware of that we can work with? To your point, Leana, what's on the shelf? It's not always 18 months of product development. Sometimes some of the things, I keep bringing up weighted blankets. It's a 2016 trend, but the needs in this space brought it back, and
Yeah.
amplified.
Well, and to
Tom-
your, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Leana.
Go ahead.
So what you're saying about kind of emotion and things coming back around, we last year during the first Market Watch report, we talked about time and space a lot, and it was very kind of pragmatic in nature. It was about, I don't have enough time to do this, I don't have enough space to do that. And now we're dealing with situations where time and space are much more emotional. When the time segment airs next week, what people are going to be surprised by is that it's not all about convenience and cutting out steps. Some of it's about finding meaningful ways to spend the extra time that you have. I've talked about this before, but I think it warrants mentioning again as we talk about changing consumer behaviors. Is there was a time during the pandemic on a weekend that my husband and I were out gardening and doing things outside, and it's not like me at all. And we spent the whole weekend doing things around the house and outside. And at one point I was like, when in the world did our weekends get this productive? And he goes, when we stopped waking up in the morning and going to soccer games and basketball games and volleyball games and birthday parties and play dates. And I thought about it and I was like, I don't know that I ever want to go back there. I mean, we were so overscheduled to the hilt that now as things are starting to open back up, my daughter's back in soccer, my son is, back in soccer, but you know what, they don't get to do 5 sports at the same time because I think we need that family time. I'm going to be more jealous about giving up the time that we've come to really value spending together.
Well, what started out on the consumer side, as you said, very transactional and necessary, have, like many trends, evolved to become aspirational, emotional and aspirational. And the retailer and the manufacturer who may have been thinking very transactional in the last 12 months just to fill the basic needs, they now have to transform their approach to understanding the consumer as being something that's transactional and necessary to something that's aspirational and emotional. Joe, speak again to that sort of transition of a consumer who did things sort of maybe out of fear, out of need, to now just doing those same things because they want to.
Well, it's part of it, what we're always trying to do that. The thing I want to build on is what Leana had said from just an overall branding perspective is what's happening now will set up, it's a dramatic event that will set up a platform for the next 10 to 15 years. And because it is so emotional, that is really calling out the importance for every brand right now to do some brand building and brand equity work to figure out, who am I? What am I going to be for the next 15 years in the consumer's mind? Because you have to win the mind and heart before you can win the rest. So I think starting there is one key part to it. Then we just got to figure out how we pivot. The second thing that I really like what Leana said is there's this tension. Like if you listen to her, there's this tension she's feeling. Well, when you hear that, again, what a great opportunity. If I can figure out how can I help her still accomplish that and yet get some of these other things, because we're all going to want to be doing both things at once. And so how do we do that? And if we can come up with something that helps allow that, both whether it's from the retailer perspective or a manufacturer's perspective, and to borrow a line from Seinfeld, there's gold there, Jerry, there's gold.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right, but time and space are both these things that mean different things at different times, and they've really changed a lot from last year. But I think that, creating quality, creating experience, you were talking about where people are shopping. We've seen a ton of online growth, okay? It's because we're stuck here. The ability to hold on to that growth and to sustain it and is going to be about online growth is about convenience. Sustaining it's going to be about being able to create an exciting experience. It's going to be sites that are more than just knowing what I want, going in, picking it out. You've got to inspire the way retail does. And some people are doing a great job. Some people haven't hit their stride yet, but that's, it's the experience just has to keep evolving.
You brought up online, Tom. I think we probably should talk a little bit about sort of what we've learned about the consumer and where and how they want to shop, and where brick and mortar kind of falls into this. Joe, I'll start with you. Is there a way to sort of summarize in a couple of minutes where the consumer is now And I know it's multiple generations of consumers, and but where the consumer is now in terms of their shopping behavior, what they expect from the retail experience, whether it's an omni-channel experience, a store experience online. Is there a point where this consumer now is sort of ingrained with some of those expectations?
I think the pandemic has helped a little bit. I think, first of all, we know the facts are that small appliances are just over 50% online this past year, and housewares and textiles are just under 50%, but we're hovering around that line. The second thing that we know is the group that grew the fastest online was adults 55 plus, followed with the 18 to 24 during this little period here. We also know that 25 to 34-year-old is the one that is also more likely to use the in-store for what they have. So to think about it in very simplistic terms is we always think the younger consumer is more technology savvy, and that's true. But we forget that when they're buying a lot of items for this life moment in categories that they may not know enough, sometimes it's just more efficient to go see, touch, feel, and have consultation to play with it. When you're older, you start to learn things and you know a little bit more what you want, and maybe you're being a little bit more precise on what your needs are. That too is what opens up some of the online opportunities. We also, when we look at categories that skew online, they tend to be much more aspirational. Those things that you can wait for, where the things that are in the store are those things that if you need it, you need it. So those needs are not going to go away. The question is, how does that change? And I think the group that probably has the chance of the biggest impact from an overall behavioral change is the older consumer who back in April didn't know how to make Zoom work, right, and nowadays are ordering their groceries online. So that concept of gaining confidence is the one that I'm really kind of watching.
Leana, do you think it sort of has reached a point, but it kind of steps back a little bit as people want to get out and maybe go to stores and things like that? Or do you think does it just keep growing, online transaction keep growing? Leana, I'll get some of your thoughts on that too, Joe and Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, again, I'll go back to what I said before, which is that I do believe that and there's not going to be some magic moment where all of us wake up one day and we're like, the pandemic's over, everyone runs into the streets. But to some degree, there will be a chunk of time that suddenly starts to feel really normal. And I do think that getting out of the house and doing things live and in person is going to be a priority for people, especially if that time comes kind of in the summer or early fall months. I think that will become a priority for people in the short term. But then I think people will settle into whatever the next normal is. We talk about the new normal we're going to see. It's going to take us time to get there because we're going to fluctuate a little while as people reemerge in society and then pull back to find the actual right balance for them. So I didn't really answer the question, but those are my thoughts.
Your thoughts, Tom, on kind of where we find this balance or where it sort of settles?
You know what? The consumer's going to find the balance for us, frankly. Right. I mean, there's certain things that it's like the habits that they pick up and what we're seeing in terms of, I mean, who would have thought that people would really want to keep, trunk delivery after the pandemic? But they do. BOPUS, you're going to buy it online, pick it up in store. People want to keep that. Now, let's hope it doesn't bite retail in the ass, frankly, because it's like, we got to get them in that store. We want them to spend some quality time with us. But these issues of convenience is right now, it's either number one or it's just behind number one to price in almost every survey because it's kept us afloat. But the good part of that is that addiction to convenience, I want it now, I have to have it now, has given a lot of new brands a voice because it's, your brand isn't available. So you're going to try private label. You're going to try, a store brand. And a lot of people are finding that they like those brands, so it's really sort of put some challenges to retail in terms of developing brands of their own with the right partners but a lot of what we're experiencing right now is just not going away. I mean, and it doesn't matter whether it's convenience issues. So luring people back to store, especially in terms of what Leana said again and Joe about, look, we're not going to be comfortable right away. So it's going to take a while to get me back in there. Let me know it's going to be safe. Let me know I'm going to have plenty of distance between people,
Joe, anything more than that?
Yeah, I think there's a place for all of them. It's going to just stick here right now. If you think about it, retail's evolved to now really is about helping the consumer solve a need. It's more than just a transaction place. It's more than just a purchase occasion. It is something that says, I have a need, and now how I'm going to solve it is going to be part of whatever that is, if I have time, if I don't have time. And so we always know, I always think of get asked the question, what's the difference between a trend and a fad? Well, we all like to try new. That's who we are. But the difference is those things that stick are the ones that either save you time or save you money. And so somewhere along the line, however that's solved is where the consumer is going to go, depending on what that need is that they have at that moment. And which channel, it's both of them. They both can do it.
I would add things that you enjoy to things that save you time and things that save you money, because if you genuinely enjoy something, that puts it in another category. And maybe that's a really important takeaway for our retailers who are watching this, is that you have a huge opportunity for a reset here, right? As if people are not going out right now, I think the Morning Consult data said that only 44% of people are really comfortable going to malls and department stores. Now, grocery stores, it's more, but so you still got more than half the population saying they're not comfortable at stores yet. But what that means is once we start to emerge again, what is the experience that you're going to deliver? What is the in-store experience you're going to deliver that puts you on the radar first and that creates some brand loyalty? There's a huge reset opportunity here for you to kind of reimagine your in-store experience in a way that could create some loyalty once people come back out again.
Well, you know what? I think we've all given our viewers today a chance to sort of see the consumer from so many different angles, and we've learned that it's not an easy thing to see. Sometimes you can get kind of blinded by all the stuff coming at you, but it's essential to keep looking and to respond with the consumer rather than waiting for the consumer to sort of get to a place. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the hot spots in terms of specific categories, but I also want to get to a couple of questions, and maybe from our audience, and maybe there's some of that in there. But I do want to stay, before we get to that, I want to stick with one question here, back to the impact of lost jobs. Leana, you started talking about this. The question is, what do you think the impact of increased savings of those who haven't lost jobs will be on the economy in general and in the housewares industry? So why don't we just kind of go quickly around the horn? What do you think of that, Leana? The impact of those who have saved more money during the pandemic.
It's hard to say, because I think people saved money during the pandemic for a number of different reasons. Some people because they decided that they needed to upgrade their home. Some people because they were in absolute fear of what might happen in the next 6 months to their job or to the economy in general. So in some of those cases, those savings might sit, right? In other cases, those will come back out and be filtered back into the economy in some way, shape, or form. I don't know that I can give a lot of intelligence beyond that train of thought. Joe and Tom, you guys might.
Yeah, Joe, you've talked about stimulus payments having a direct impact on spending in this business. So whether you save more money because you have your job, or you're getting a stimulus check, or you've found another way to get a little bit more in your wallet, what did we learn about how they're going to spend that?
Well, what we do know is this: they're spending. We know even last week, the week ending the 6th, consumer spending across all general merchandise was up 6%. We know that as it relates to our industries, it's all up around 30%. So we have been really, this whole first part of 2021, just tremendous growth, in part because of the stimulus, but also in part because of the money being saved as the person asked. So it just, right now for our industry, when you are an industry that is of importance and need for the consumer, we also save money by not going out to eat as much. It's still 3 to 4 times cheaper to eat at home. There's just so many things that feed into our business that we have.
Also, ready-to-wear is taking a really big hit. So there's a lot of money that hasn't been spent. Like, I'm not wearing pants right now, so there was money saved. And but that whole there's money there. Also, our industry, like to Joe's 30%, the housewares industry, the home and housewares industry has been, the sanity hero through a lot of this. People have been redecorating, learning new things, being creative, learning to do new things, whether it's, sort of decorating or cooking or whatever it is. And we've gotten comfortable with our homes again. A lot of people have been doing a lot of shifting. Like Joe said, we're still going to be working at home a lot. We're still going to be eating at home a lot. And if you think back to the last recession, like 2008, cookware businesses went up. People started trading up on things that they use more frequently, things that they used every day, because they were like, you know what? I deserve that, and I'm putting the time into it. So I want to trade up for that. And Gen X in particular is very good about trading off. Okay, well, I didn't get this, so I'm going to get this. You know, they have kids, they want experiences constantly in the house. They're the largest, you know, child generation with children in the house. And, you know, so it's, I think our industry creates experience. That's what we've been great at. We just can't, if we want to maintain any sort of growth, we have to keep delivering that, pandemic or no pandemic. We've had an amazing opportunity to do it. Consumers have been great to us, and we've been great back. And we have to remember that restaurants have been, for housewares, a trickle down of ideas like sous vide and frittatas and all these other things. And they're not there anymore. So at least not with the influence temporarily that they used to have. So our industry, our manufacturing, our retailers, we have to provide ideas about what's next so that we can inspire some of those purchases.
Tom raises a good point too, that, you know, when I looked at the data that we had before, you know, roughly 40% of all purchases for small appliances have been always about replacement. You know, the rest would be new or upgrades or additional. But the pandemic, that jumped up almost to 45%. So an extra 10%. So we forget about all these meals and all these things that we're cleaning in the house and all the other stuff. It's also opening up the door for replacement. So it's not only the new needs that are out there, but there are going to be these times because it's just more usage of a product that is also going to be opening the door for us. So sometimes we forget about that. That's a good point.
We've got a couple of questions about specific categories. And Tom, you mentioned decorating, you know, and home decor has seen a big boom for a number of reasons, home improvement projects, people redecorating the home. The question is there a point where that redecoration is and all those home improvement projects sort of start to mitigate and that category falls back? I'm curious what you all might think about that.
Big improvements are going to slow down a bit. You know, I really like to look at I like to look at the real estate association sites because they really tell you how homes are being built out, what people are asking for in new homes, and that tells you a lot. And also renovation sites, there's a lot of great information about there about, you know, people have taken some of the focus off of bathrooms and they're putting more focus on actually, you know, if they're not tearing down dining room walls now because that has now become the need for a separate space that they may need again. So, you know, I like to look at that. But again, it all goes back to constantly studying what the consumer is doing. You know, I mean, dining at the dining room table is now up at 71%. You know, so you're, you know, it's like, okay, well, we have to pay attention to the dining room. Well, yeah, but you've got 29% of people, 27% are eating in the living room. How are we serving them? How are we making that easier? Because there's plenty of dinnerware out there. There's plenty of stuff to eat in the dining room, but there's not a lot to make it convenient to eat in front of the television. If that's what we're doing, you know? So I think consumer realities, if you know how to look at them, they create solutions.
One of the questions is an interesting question. There have been a lot of factors that have increased prices in the last couple of years, from tariffs to you know, just general rising costs of imports and manufacturing and all those things. Has the pandemic made consumers willing to pay a couple pennies more for things? Joe, do you know that where price sensitivity sort of has settled in?
Well, I'll just stay for us and give a broader thing. For us, because the industry has been so hot, pretty much every price band's going. So that's a way to think of it. But the bigger question is long term. So before I get to that, one other thing, when I look at the other industries that we have at NPD that we track, the industries that were struggling, you know, some apparel, beauty, things like that, a lot of the industries that declined actually dropped in price. Where the industries that grew, like sports equipment and toys and technology and home, our prices actually went up. So the reality is in the areas where the consumer was seeking the products and they fulfilled a need, the consumer is willing to pay for it. I think the bigger question is what's going to happen going forward? And in the suggestion there that I have is this is where we as an industry, really going back to what Leana said at the beginning, is we have to really make sure that we're innovating in our marketing. And part of it is how do we demonstrate the savings? because it is cheaper to eat at home. It is cheaper to cut your own hair. It is cheaper to do all these things. And so if we can communicate the savings that people have overall to their budget, it will help us. So how do you communicate that while also communicating the benefits in your brands? That's where the creativity is going to come in.
And even financing of that. I mean, pardon me. You know, we've seen the reemergence of the layaway plan. I don't know how many people are old enough to know it, as Leana's like, what's a layaway plan? But like, you know, that idea of, you know, pay it off in installments without having to put it on your credit card or whatever, you know, well, you do, of course. But, you know, so I think that some of that, it's not always product answers. A lot of times it's service answers. And it's really getting everybody in the organization at the table and saying, here's the problem. How is your division going to answer that? You know, how are you going to speak to that?
There's a question here about housewares and appliances having historically been counter-cyclical and doing well during recessions. And how does this panel think they'll behave around this? I know we touched a lot about what's going to stick and what's going to not going to stick, but I think this goes to the point, the way housewares and appliances in this category performed before we got to this. I mean, there are some truisms, but I think you almost have to move forward. And I almost, as a way of closing this up right now, I'll go around the horn. You almost have to move forward saying that we're going to invent new realities and new truisms as an industry paying attention to the consumer. Leana, some final thoughts in terms of, you know, what are the patterns and what does this industry have to do to maybe live up to some of those historical patterns or maybe just break them down?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter than the former. I really think that there's an opportunity here, as we talked about, different ways to think about those home and housewares product occasions, different ways to think about how you're going to create in-store experiences that are sticky and that bring people back into your store. I think it's time to maybe, you know, certainly be informed by what has happened in the past, but really, I mean, we're going to enter a bit of a brave new world here. I really believe that, because I think that there are some things that will stick from the pandemic. I think there are some things we will go back to from before that. But I think the number of new behaviors and new things that consumers are going to be doing and things that they're going to be feeling and acting on, I think are things we're not even thinking of right now. So to the point about let's keep our finger on the pulse here. Let's not look at them once a year. Let's keep, you know, paying attention to what's happening and being ready to pivot. So I think you get informed by the past, but I think the future could break the mold very easily.
Joe, your thoughts?
Well, the last 7 years, we have been one of the fastest growing industries of all industries that we track. We've always been in the top 3 over the holidays. We've always been in the top 2 from a percent dollar change. So for 7 years in a row, our industry has been doing very well. We were forecasting from our food team who does forecasts and what have you, before the pandemic, that the number of meals in home were going to increase. So we were already even heading that direction of just because also people retiring and when you're home, you just eat more. Like it's there that we have. So we were already growing. We were forecasted to continue growing. And now I think all the things that we talked about from working home, it just makes it even more. The question is, so I think from a long-term perspective, let's say over the next 10 years, this has been a benefit for us. If we're smart, we can even catapult this even bigger. That said, there are going to be some times, and we're right in the middle of doing the forecast for next year and the year after and the year after that. And those are ones this year, we still got to sort out, but I suggest to everybody, you've got to look at the macro thing. And I guarantee over the next 10 years, we're on the way up if we're smart. In the individual years, we got to figure it out.
Well, and Joe, you've mentioned before, I'm sorry, just to, point out, you've mentioned before that it may not be the right thing to compare 2021 to 2020. Yes. You need to go back to 2019 and you need to think about, what was our trajectory and where do we land? 2020 is such an anomaly in so many ways that it's tough to base any decisions on that.
So Tom, you get to put a bow on this. Where do we land?
Okay. I'll put a bow and a curl. So first I would say that there are two companies that I think right now we're getting a lot of influx. We're getting a lot of attention. We're doing a great job. I think we just have to be careful of, the problem with being able to do anything is that you usually do. So there are two companies that I think do a great job. Frankly, Costco is one of them, and Williams-Sonoma is another. And that what they do with housewares is, if it's not better, we're not doing it. So like Williams-Sonoma, if you're going to put in a citrus streamer, no citrus streamer hits the floor unless it's better than the one that's already there, and then that one goes away. And Costco has their standard of we're not going to put in anything under our private label brand unless it stands up to the best brand in the business in that category. I think that sort of editing is really important. If you can't bring something new to the market, don't bring anything. It is about what's better about what you're doing now, because consumers are, I don't want to say they're innovation driven, but they're definitely they want benefits. They want new benefits. They want more benefits, and so as Joe said, new is always going to be better. The other thing is the value equation is completely changed. Tomorrow we're doing something called the Now Normal, which is exploring for home and housewares. What is the value equation now for home and housewares consumers versus national averages and things like that? And is it price, is it quantity, is it experience, and what are people saying about it? And that's also interesting.
Well, we have learned one thing. We've said it before, but it's true today. The consumer really is the boss, and the consumer is going to help define who is successful and who is not successful in this business as we go forward. That was a very informative session. I want to thank Joe, Tom, Leana. That closes the session today on the post-COVID consumer. I hope you got some insights that you can put to action. I'd like to thank our speakers and our sponsor, Ucopia, and all of you for joining us today. And as mentioned earlier, these sessions will be posted on the IHA website in mid-April. I thank you all for your participation, and we hope to see you at additional Connect Spring sessions. Have a great day. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.